Welcome to the Sleepy Brain Dose. Here, science unfolds in a calm rhythm, designed to ease your mind as you drift toward rest. In this journey, we'll explore the story of life itself, how it began, how it grew, and how it became the world you know today. No rush, no noise, only gentle narration, like a slow breath in the quiet of night. Allow yourself to settle into softness, knowing you are safe, and let curiosity carry you toward sleep. Life, as we know it today, traces back to a time when the earth was still young, quiet, and unrecognizable compared to the world you see now. If you imagine the planet more than 3.5 billion years ago, you would not find trees, animals, or even the smallest blade of grass. Instead, you would see a vast planet covered by oceans, clouds of volcanic gases, and rocks shaped by slow geological rhythms. It is in this watery environment that the first steps toward life unfolded, not suddenly, but in a gradual, patient sequence that took millions of years. You may notice, as you listen, that the rhythm of this story is steady, like a calm breath, reminding you that creation itself often moves slowly, without haste. The oceans were not only expanses of water. They were rich with minerals, salts, and simple chemical compounds washed from rocks and carried by rain. Scientists often describe this environment as a primordial soup, though the image is not about food, but about a mixture of ingredients, waiting for new combinations. In this vast liquid, molecules drifted freely, colliding and separating, joining and breaking apart. Over time, some of these molecules formed more complex patterns. There was no rush, no urgency, only repetition-like. Waves touching the shore again and again. Out of this patient repetition, something new began to emerge. Among the most important molecules were amino acids, the building blocks of proteins. These small structures could form naturally when simple gases like methane, ammonia, and hydrogen were energized by lightning or ultraviolet light. Laboratory experiments in the 20th century demonstrated that under conditions similar to early Earth, such amino acids appear almost on their own, as if the chemistry of our planet leaned gently toward life. Imagine these molecules not as dramatic sparks, but as quiet participants floating in water, waiting for the right moment to link together. Slowly they did, and chains of amino acids formed the first proteins. Molecules that could bend, fold, and carry out simple functions at the same time. Other molecules called nucleotides began to assemble. These are the small units that, when joined, create RNA and DNA, the carriers of information in all living things. Early RNA molecules may have acted both as information holders and as simple catalysts, able to guide chemical reactions. In this way, the ocean became not only a container of molecules, but also a quiet laboratory where chance encounters slowly turned into repeating patterns. Over millions of years, these repeating patterns became the first whispers of life. Transition from chemistry to biology was not a sharp line, but a continuum. It may help to think of it like a tide slowly rising, gradually transforming the landscape without a clear moment of beginning. Small droplets, formed from fatty acids, created tiny bubbles in the water. These bubbles, known as protocells, had the ability to enclose molecules inside them, protecting fragile chains of RNA and proteins from being broken apart. With this simple boundary, something remarkable happened. The inside of the bubble could be different from the outside. This separation allowed molecules to cooperate, to build on each other's actions, and to persist longer than before. The bubble did not yet live in the way we understand life, but it was closer than anything that had existed previously. Inside these protocells, molecules interacted in cycles. Some cycles used energy from sunlight, others from chemical gradients. In the environment, slowly, these cycles became more efficient. A system that could copy information, even imperfectly, had an advantage over one that could not. Errors occurred, but sometimes errors created variations that worked better, allowing those protocells to remain a little longer, to divide, and to give rise to slightly altered descendants. This was the beginning of evolution, not the dramatic kind we associate with animals and plants, but a soft, molecular evolution, guided by time and chance, filtered by survival. The ocean was essential in this story. It provided not only water as a solvent, but also stability. On land, molecules would have been destroyed quickly by harsh sunlight or rapid changes in temperature. In the sea, especially in deeper waters, conditions were gentler, buffered by the mass of water. Heat from undersea vents offered steady energy, while minerals provided surfaces where molecules could gather and react. Some scientists believe that life began precisely at these hydrothermal vents, where hot, mineral-rich water met the cooler ocean, creating gradients of energy. Others suggest shallow pools near the coastline, where evaporation concentrated molecules into dense mixtures. Both possibilities share the same theme. Life required both diversity of conditions and stability, both energy to drive reactions and a safe space to allow fragile beginnings to persist. As protocells became more robust, the line between non-living chemistry and living biology blurred further. Eventually, one of these systems gained the ability to replicate itself reliably, to carry information forward in time. That was the turning point. With replication, life could continue beyond the existence of a single molecule or bubble. With variation, life could explore possibilities. With selection, life could improve, however slowly. The ocean, in its depth and calmness, allowed this exploration to last without interruption. It is worth noticing the timescale. Human history spans thousands of years, and even the age of our species is counted in hundreds of thousands. Yet the rise from simple chemistry to the first living cells took billions of years. This length of time is almost impossible to grasp, yet it also carries a sense of calm. Nothing was hurried. Molecules did not know where they were heading, yet step by step, they built a foundation for everything that would follow. You may find comfort in this perspective. The universe itself does not rush, and even the most extraordinary transformations happen in soft increments. The first true cells, known as prokaryotes, eventually emerged from these protocells. They were simple, without nuclei, but they could maintain themselves, reproduce, and evolve. From their point of view, they were complete. They needed nothing more. And yet, from this simplicity, the diversity of life would one day unfold. But that belongs to later parts of the story. For now, in the cradle of the ocean, the most important step had been taken. Molecules had learned to cooperate, to persist, and to replicate. The spark of life, gentle and enduring, had begun. When you think of this origin, you may imagine not a dramatic event, but a slow, peaceful unfolding. Life began not with a shout, but with a whisper, not with sudden light, but with the soft rhythm of water and time. The ocean, in its quiet vastness, was the first home of life, and in many ways, it still carries that memory. Every breath you take, every drop of water you drink, connects you to that ancient beginning. It is a reminder that life's deepest roots are not only scientific facts, but also stories of patience, resilience, and calm. After the earliest protocells learned how to preserve molecules inside protective boundaries, a new step unfolded in the long rhythm of Earth's story. What emerged were the first complete cells, organisms that could grow, reproduce, and adapt. These early forms are known today as prokaryotic cells. They were not complex in shape or structure, but they carried everything necessary for life. Their simplicity did not make them weak. In fact, it made them enduring, able to persist in environments where more fragile systems would not survive. A prokaryotic cell is small, much smaller than the cells that later made up plants or animals. Imagine something invisible to the naked eye, yet perfectly organized within its tiny space. There is no nucleus, no membrane-bound compartments. Instead, all the essential molecules float freely in the watery interior. And yet, this simplicity is efficient. Genetic information, stored in strands of DNA, directs the production of proteins. Proteins, in turn, perform the functions that allow the cell to survive. The boundary of the cell, its membrane, acts like a gentle skin. It separates inside from outside, but it also allows nutrients to come in and waste to go out. The design is basic, but it works so well that prokaryotic cells have thrived for billions of years. There are two great groups of prokaryotes, bacteria and archaea. Both share the same overall simplicity, but they differ in details of their chemistry. Bacteria are perhaps more familiar, since we encounter them in everyday life, in soil, water, and even inside our own bodies. Archaea, by contrast, often live in extreme environments, boiling springs, salty lakes, or deep ocean vents. Yet despite their differences, both groups embody the same principle: survival through simplicity, adaptation through flexibility. Consider the role of DNA in these early cells. In prokaryotes, DNA is not enclosed in a nucleus, but is arranged in a loop that floats in the cytoplasm. This loop is small compared to the vast genomes of later organisms, but it contains enough instructions to maintain life. Because the DNA is exposed and accessible, it can be copied quickly. When a prokaryotic cell divides, it simply makes a copy of its DNA and splits in two. The process is called binary fission, and it is remarkably efficient. With enough nutrients, some bacteria can double their population in minutes. This capacity for rapid reproduction has allowed prokaryotes to colonize every corner of the planet. The surface of these cells also holds secrets to their endurance. Many prokaryotes are surrounded by a cell wall, a rigid layer that adds strength and protection. The wall helps them maintain shape, even in changing environments. For bacteria, this wall often contains a molecule called peptidoglycan, giving extra durability. Archaea, though lacking peptidoglycan, use other structures that provide equal resilience. In either case, the cell wall acts like a gentle shield, allowing the cell to keep its balance even when the world outside shifts. Metabolism, the set of chemical reactions that sustain life, is another area where prokaryotes reveal their versatility. Some rely on sunlight, using photosynthesis to build energy. Others feed on chemicals, extracting power from sulfur, iron, or methane. Still others use oxygen to generate energy, a strategy that became more common after the rise of photosynthetic organisms filled the atmosphere with oxygen. This metabolic diversity means that prokaryotes can live almost anywhere, from deep underground rocks to the surface of glaciers, from acidic pools to the human intestine. Wherever there is water, however little, some form of prokaryotic life usually exists. You may notice how this adaptability mirrors the gentle persistence of breath. Each inhalation is simple, yet repeated over time. It sustains life. In the same way, prokaryotic cells survive, not by being complex, but by repeating simple processes reliably. Copy DNA, divide, gather nutrients, release waste, Repeat. This rhythm, maintained for billions of years, forms the heartbeat of evolution, though invisible. Prokaryotes have shaped the planet itself. Cyanobacteria, a group of photosynthetic bacteria, began releasing oxygen as a byproduct of their metabolism more than 2 billion years ago. Over vast stretches of time, oxygen accumulated in the atmosphere, transforming Earth from an anoxic world into one where complex life could eventually thrive. Without this slow and steady contribution, animals and plants could never have existed. What began as tiny cells quietly altered the air you now breathe. Prokaryotes also played a role in creating ecological cycles. By breaking down organic material, they recycled nutrients back into the environment. By forming symbiotic relationships, they supported the survival of other organisms. Even today, bacteria in your gut help digest food, while bacteria in the soil enrich it for plants. In this sense, prokaryotes are not only ancient survivors, but also constant companions, woven into the fabric of every ecosystem. Archaea, often overlooked, remind us of life's resilience. Many archaea are extremophiles, meaning they live in conditions once thought uninhabitable. Some thrive in boiling hot springs, others in waters so salty that few other creatures can endure them. Still others live in the deep ocean, where pressure is immense and light never penetrates. Their survival shows that life is not fragile, but deeply adaptable. It whispers a calming truth. Life does not demand perfect conditions. It adjusts, endures, and persists even where we least expect it. The history of prokaryotes also teaches us about time. For more than 2 billion years, they were the only form of life on Earth. Imagine that long expanse, oceans filled with nothing but microscopic cells, dividing and drifting. To our human perspective, it may seem monotonous, but to life itself, it was abundance and success. Evolution did not hurry. The groundwork had to be steady before complexity could arise. Just as sleep requires deep stillness before dreams appear, life required these long ages of simplicity before more intricate forms emerged. Even today, prokaryotes remain the most numerous organisms on the planet. By sheer numbers, they outweigh all animals combined. They live in places you see and in places you cannot, from the soil under your feet to the clouds above. They are reminders that simplicity can be powerful, and that survival often lies in resilience rather than complexity. As you reflect on prokaryotic cells, you may sense their quiet wisdom. They teach that endurance is not about strength alone, but about adaptability. They show that even the smallest unit of life can hold the key to entire planetary systems. And they remind us that life's story is not just about progress toward complexity, but about the quiet persistence that makes progress possible. The chapter of prokaryotic life is not a brief introduction, but the longest act in Earth's history. For billions of years, these cells were the whole of the living world. Everything you know today, forests, animals, people, was built on their foundation. Their simplicity was not a limitation, but a gift, providing stability through time. In their soft persistence, you can hear an echo of the calm rhythms that underlie all existence. In the long unfolding of Earth's history, one of the most profound transformations came not from volcanoes or shifting continents, but from tiny cells floating in the ocean. These cells, simple in form yet extraordinary in effect, discovered a new way of capturing energy. They learned to use sunlight itself, transforming it into food. This process, called photosynthesis, began quietly, yet over millions of years it altered the very nature of the atmosphere. It was not a sudden event, but a slow revolution, one that turned a world of limited possibilities into a planet capable of supporting complex life. To appreciate this change, it is helpful to picture the Earth more than 2.5 billion years ago. At that time, the atmosphere held almost no oxygen. Instead, it was filled with gases like methane, carbon dioxide, and nitrogen. For the earliest forms of life, anaerobic microbes, this was enough. They carried out their metabolism without oxygen, relying on chemical reactions that did not require it. To them, oxygen would have seemed unnecessary, even harmful. In fact, oxygen was toxic to many of these ancient organisms. Yet, in the shallow waters of ancient seas, a group of bacteria known as cyanobacteria began to use sunlight. In a different way, they captured photons of light and used the energy to split water molecules, releasing oxygen as a byproduct. For them, it was a natural cycle, a way to gain energy and build sugars. But for the planet, this seemingly small innovation marked a turning point. With each tiny release of oxygen, the chemistry of the oceans and atmosphere began to shift. At first, the oxygen did not remain free in the air. Instead, it reacted with dissolved iron in the oceans. Iron, abundant in early seas, easily combined with oxygen to form iron oxides. These oxides settled to the seafloor, creating thick layers of reddish rock that geologists still see today, known as banded iron formations. These ancient deposits are silent witnesses to the slow accumulation of oxygen, locked away in stone before it could fill the atmosphere. For millions of years, this process continued. Oxygen released by cyanobacteria was absorbed by the oceans, by iron, by volcanic gases. The planet seemed to resist the change, soaking up oxygen as quickly as it was produced. But the cyanobacteria did not stop. With the steady rhythm of sunlight, they carried out photosynthesis day after day, generation after generation. Slowly, the sinks that captured oxygen became saturated. At last, oxygen began to accumulate in the atmosphere itself. This event is often called the Great Oxidation Event, and though the word great may suggest sudden drama, in truth it unfolded over vast spans of time. Between 2.4 and 2.0 billion years ago, oxygen levels rose from almost nothing to a noticeable presence. For anaerobic organisms that had thrived in the absence of oxygen, this change was catastrophic. Many species vanished, unable to cope with the new conditions. Yet for the future of life, the arrival of oxygen was essential. It provided a new source of energy and opened pathways toward greater complexity. Oxygen is powerful because it allows cells to extract much more energy from food than other chemical processes. Through aerobic respiration, organisms can produce many times more energy than through anaerobic methods. This extra energy makes larger cells possible. It makes multicellular cooperation possible. It makes movement, complexity, and eventually, consciousness possible. Without oxygen, the rich diversity of plants and animals could never have arisen. Even as oxygen spread through the atmosphere, its concentration remained relatively low for a long time. The air was not yet like the air you breathe today. It took hundreds of millions of years for oxygen to reach stable levels that could support the evolution of truly complex life. In that long interim, prokaryotic cells continued to dominate, adapting to the changing world. Some learned to use oxygen, becoming more efficient. Others retreated to oxygen-free environments, surviving in niches where anaerobic life is still found today, such as deep sediments and hydrothermal vents. Story of photosynthesis is not only about chemistry, but also about light and rhythm. Cyanobacteria captured the energy of the sun in a gentle cycle, turning light into sugar, water into oxygen. This rhythm continues even now, in every leaf of every tree, in every blade of grass, in every algal cell drifting in the sea. When you breathe in, the oxygen that fills your lungs is a direct descendant of that ancient cycle. Each breath is a quiet reminder of the slow, patient revolution that reshaped the earth. It is remarkable to consider how small organisms created such a vast change. Cyanobacteria did not plan to alter the planet. They simply followed the logic of survival, using the tools available to them. Yet their persistence over billions of years produced an atmosphere where larger, more complex beings could one day thrive. This reveals a calming truth about life. Profound change often arises not from sudden force, but from countless small actions repeated gently over time. The legacy of the great oxidation event can still be traced in the rocks and in the air. The banded iron formations remind us of a time when the seas were filled with dissolved iron, turning red with rust as oxygen was released. The very presence of breathable air is a living legacy of cyanobacteria's innovation. And the ozone layer, which protects life from harmful ultraviolet radiation, is made from oxygen as well. Without photosynthesis, Earth would not only lack animals and plants, but would also be unshielded from the harshness of the sun dot. As you reflect on this chapter of evolution, you may find comfort in its rhythm. Oxygen did not arrive all at once. It gathered slowly, resisted at first, then gradually shaped the world. In this way, the story mirrors the nature of calm breathing. Inhale gently, exhale softly, repeat without urgency. Over time, these small acts create balance and life. The photosynthesis revolution was not the end of the journey, but the beginning of new possibilities. By filling the air with oxygen, cyanobacteria prepared the stage for eukaryotic cells, for multicellular organisms, and for the rich diversity that would follow. It was the soft foundation upon which the future of life was built. When you think of it, you may imagine not noise or disruption, but a slow sunrise spreading across the planet, light captured by tiny cells, oxygen released into the air, and the world quietly transformed. After the great oxidation event slowly filled the Earth's atmosphere with oxygen, the stage was set for another quiet transformation. This change was not about a new gas in the air, but about the way living cells themselves were built. From the simple prokaryote cells without nuclei, emerged a new type of cell with greater complexity and capacity. These were the eukaryotic cells, and from them all plants, fungi, and animals would eventually descend. At first glance, the step from prokaryote to eukaryote may seem like a leap, but it was also a story of patience, cooperation, and endurance. For nearly 2 billion years, the Earth was ruled by prokaryotic life. They filled every niche, multiplied quickly, and survived extremes. Yet simplicity had limits. To grow larger, to store more information, to carry out more specialized tasks, cells needed a new design. That new design came through a process scientists call endosymbiosis, literally, living together from within. The central idea of endosymbiosis is that one cell came to live inside another, not as prey or parasite, but as a partner. Long ago, some prokaryotic cells engulfed smaller ones, perhaps intending to consume them. But instead of being digested, those smaller cells survived inside their hosts. Over time, both partners discovered advantages in the arrangement. The larger cell provided shelter and stability. The smaller cell provided energy. Together, they were stronger than either could be alone. The most famous products of this partnership are mitochondria, the so-called powerhouses of eukaryotic cells. These tiny organelles are descended from bacteria that once lived independently. Inside a host cell, they specialized in using oxygen to produce energy with remarkable efficiency. Because mitochondria could generate far more energy than anaerobic pathways, they gave their host cells a significant advantage. With more energy, cells could grow larger, maintain more internal structures, and carry out more complex activities. Another partnership gave rise to chloroplasts, the green organelles that carry out photosynthesis in plants and algae. Chloroplasts trace their ancestry to cyanobacteria, the same bacteria that began releasing oxygen into Earth's atmosphere. When engulfed by early eukaryotic cells, these cyanobacteria continued to capture sunlight and produce sugars. For their hosts, this was a new way of life. They could make food directly from light. From this collaboration came the ancestors of plants, and with them, the vast green cover that still shapes our planet. These partnerships are more than historical curiosities. They remind us that cooperation can be a source of strength, even at the most basic levels of life. A eukaryotic cell is not a single individual, but a community, a blend of lineages that chose not to destroy each other, but to merge. This merging was not conscious, of course, but over time it became stable and irreversible. The smaller cells lost their independence, passing most of their genes to the host nucleus, but they retained enough to carry out their specialized functions. In return, the host cells came to rely on them completely. Even today, your own mitochondria carry traces of their bacterial ancestry, with their own small loops of DNA. Beyond these organelles, eukaryotic cells developed new internal structures that gave them greater flexibility. They built a nucleus, a central compartment enclosed by its own membrane, where DNA could be stored, protected, and carefully regulated. This innovation allowed the genome to grow larger and more complex, supporting more instructions for life. They also formed an endoplasmic reticulum and Golgi apparatus networks for building, folding, and distributing proteins. They created a cytoskeleton, a dynamic framework that gave the cell shape, movement, and the ability to transport materials internally. All of these innovations made eukaryotic cells much more versatile than their prokaryotic ancestors. While bacteria could adapt by sheer numbers, eukaryotes adapted by specialization. They could grow larger, change shape, engulf food, and communicate in new ways. They could form colonies where individual cells took on different roles, foreshadowing the multicellular organisms to come. Yet, even as they gained complexity, eukaryotic cells never lost their reliance on the rhythms established by prokaryotes. Mitochondria continued the work of aerobic respiration. Chloroplasts, in some lineages, carried on photosynthesis. The nucleus managed genetic information, but the language of DNA and RNA remained the same, passed down from the earliest ancestors. In this way, eukaryotic cells were not a replacement for prokaryotes, but an elaboration. Built on ancient foundations. It is striking to consider the timescale. The first eukaryotic cells are thought to have arisen around 2 billion years ago. For hundreds of millions of years afterward, they existed mostly as single-celled organisms. Some were protozoa, drifting in the oceans, feeding on bacteria or each other. Others were algae, capturing light and releasing oxygen. Their lives were simple, yet their structures held the potential for all future complexity. Plants, animals, fungi. Each lineage began as a branch of the eukaryotic tree. The calm persistence of eukaryotes mirrors the idea that growth often comes not through sudden leaps, but through integration. By taking in others, by keeping what was useful, by discarding what was not, they became more than the sum of their parts. This principle repeated at many scales, shapes much of life. Communities form, ecosystems balance, species coexist. The eukaryotic cell was an early example of this gentle truth. Even today, your body is built of trillions of eukaryotic cells. Each one carries a nucleus with DNA, mitochondria that hum with energy, and membranes that separate inside from outside. Each cell is a living echo of those ancient partnerships. And in every breath you take, in every heartbeat, you can trace the cooperation that began billions of years ago when one cell sheltered another. Eukaryotic cells did not end evolution's story, but they expanded its possibilities. They opened the door to multicellularity, to tissues and organs, to creatures that could move, think, and dream. They transformed Earth's biosphere from a world of microscopic life into a world of forests, oceans teeming with fish, and eventually, human beings reflecting on their origins. When you think of eukaryotic cells, you may picture not a complex machine, but a quiet community, parts working together, energy flowing from mitochondria, light captured by chloroplasts, DNA guarded in the nucleus, each part contributing, each part essential. It is a calm image, one of cooperation rather than conflict, endurance rather than haste. The rise of eukaryotic cells was one of evolution's most important steps, yet it unfolded in silence, at a microscopic scale, over immense stretches of time. It is a reminder that transformation often begins invisibly, beneath the surface, carried forward by patience and partnership. Just as the slow rhythm of your breath sustains you without effort, so too did the rhythm of endosymbiosis sustain the birth of complexity. From that quiet beginning came the diversity of life you see today. For billions of years, life on Earth existed only as single cells. Whether prokaryotic or eukaryotic, each cell lived, fed, reproduced, and died as an independent unit. This world of microscopic individuals was vast, varied, and resilient. Yet, hidden within the quiet repetition of cellular life, a new possibility was waiting. The ability of cells not merely to exist side by side, but to work together as one. From this cooperation arose multicellularity, one of the most profound transitions in the history of life. Not at its heart, multicellularity is a story of connection. A single cell can do many things, but its size and efficiency are limited. If it grows too large, its surface cannot bring in enough nutrients to sustain its volume. Its internal processes become stretched, and communication within the cell becomes less effective. By remaining small, cells preserved efficiency, but at the cost of complexity. The solution was not to make one cell endlessly larger, but to bring many cells together, each remaining small and efficient, yet cooperating in harmony. The first steps toward multicellularity were likely simple. Individual cells began sticking together after division, forming small clusters. At first, these clusters may have been temporary, breaking apart when conditions changed. But over time, adhesion became more stable. Molecules on the surface of cells evolved to help them stay connected. These clusters had subtle advantages. Together, cells could resist currents in the water, avoid being eaten, or share resources more effectively. Survival favored cooperation. Gradually, these clusters developed coordination. Some cells began to specialize, performing slightly different roles within the group. In algae, for example, some cells might focus on photosynthesis, while others took on reproduction. This division of labor made the group more efficient than any single cell could be on its own. Specialization required communication, and so new systems evolved to pass signals between cells. Chemical messengers, protein channels, and direct connections all became tools for multicellular coordination. The leap from clusters of cells to true multicellular organisms took millions of years. Fossil evidence suggests that simple multicellular life already existed more than 1.5 billion years ago. These early forms were not complex plants or animals, but colonies of algae and simple eukaryotes. They showed that once cells learned to cooperate, the path toward larger and more varied organisms was open. Multicellularity arose multiple times, independently in different lineages. Plants, fungi, and animals all developed multicellularity separately, showing that the principle was not a single accident, but a recurring solution to life's challenges. Each lineage found its own ways of binding cells together and coordinating their functions. In fungi, networks of thread-like cells formed structures that could spread across soil and decompose organic matter. In plants, rigid cell walls and channels, called plasmidesmata, allowed water and nutrients to flow from cell to cell. In animals, flexible tissues and intricate signaling pathways gave rise to movement, sensation, and thought. It is striking to realize that your own body is an outcome of this ancient transition. You are made of trillions of cells, each with its own boundaries, yet all working together. Your skin cells protect, your muscle cells contract, your neurons transmit signals, your blood cells carry oxygen. Each type of cell has its own identity, yet none could survive alone. The unity of the body is the ultimate expression of cellular cooperation, and it rests on principles first, established more than 1 billion years ago. The rise of multicellularity also transformed ecosystems. With larger organisms came new ways of interacting with the environment. Early multicellular algae grew into mats and filaments that changed the chemistry of shallow waters. Simple animals filtered water and recycled nutrients. As multicellular life diversified, food webs grew more complex. Energy flowed not only between individuals, but through entire communities of interacting species. One key aspect of multicellularity was programmed cooperation at the level of reproduction. For single-celled organisms, reproduction was often as simple as dividing in two. For multicellular organisms, the challenge was greater: how to produce offspring that could preserve the entire cooperative system. The solution was to set aside certain cells for reproduction, while others took on supportive roles. Germ cells carried the genetic information to the next generation, while somatic cells supported survival in the present. This distinction allowed multicellular organisms to maintain stability while exploring new forms of complexity. The success of multicellularity depended not only on cooperation, but also on trust. In a biological sense, within an organism, cells must follow shared rules. If one cell refuses cooperation, dividing uncontrollably, ignoring signals, it threatens the whole system. Even today, cancer in multicellular organisms is a reminder of what happens when this trust breaks down. Evolution favored mechanisms that encouraged cooperation and suppressed selfish behavior among cells. Over time, these safeguards allowed multicellular life to flourish without collapsing back into chaos. From a calm perspective, multicellularity can be seen not as a sudden invention, but as a patient negotiation. Cells learned slowly to stay together, to share work, to communicate, and to specialize. The rhythm of life shifted from the independence of single cells to the harmony of collective existence. This rhythm is echoed in the patterns of nature: schools of fish, flocks of birds, human societies. Cooperation at one scale often mirrors cooperation at another. It is worth remembering the time scale again. For billions of years, single cells were enough. Multicellularity did not appear early, but only after the long preparation of eukaryotic cells with nuclei, mitochondria, and internal organization. Complexity needed a strong foundation before it could rise. And once it did, the possibilities expanded enormously. From algae to animals, from fungi to flowering plants, multicellularity became the canvas upon which evolution painted the diversity of life. When you think of this transition, you may picture not a sudden leap, but a slow gathering, like drops of water forming a stream. Each cell, small and fragile on its own, found greater strength in connection. Together, they created new forms, new abilities, new futures. That gentle principle that strength arises from vices. Cooperation remains at the heart of life today. The rise of multicellularity was not the end of life's story, but it was a new chapter. It marked the beginning of larger bodies, tissues, and organs of ecosystems more intricate than ever before. It was the quiet opening of a door through which evolution would eventually lead to forests, coral reefs, and human beings reflecting on their origins. All of it began when cells, in their patient rhythm, chose to live not alone, but together. Once cells had learned to live together in cooperation, a new chapter in the story of life began. The oceans, already home to single-celled bacteria and algae, slowly filled with organisms made of many cells working in harmony. These earliest, multicellular beings were not yet animals in the form we recognize today. They were simple, often soft-bodied, and they lacked bones, shells, or complex organs. Yet, in their quiet existence, they marked the first steps toward the vast diversity of life that the seas would one day hold. The early multicellular organisms appeared in the oceans more than 600 million years ago. Fossils of these forms are found in rocks from what is known as the Ediacaran period, a span of time before the famous Cambrian explosion. These fossils reveal creatures that were flat, frond-like, or disc-shaped. Some resembled leaves, though they were not plants. Others looked like quilted mats pressed into stone. Many were anchored to the seafloor, absorbing nutrients directly from the water. Their bodies were soft, lacking the hard skeletons or shells that would evolve later. Because of this softness, their fossils are rare and often delicate, preserved. Only under exceptional conditions. Although they may seem primitive, these organisms represented a great leap forward. By combining cells into larger bodies, they could grow to sizes far beyond those of single-celled organisms. Some reached lengths of a meter or more, towering over the microbial mats that carpeted the ocean floor. Their presence changed the dynamics of marine ecosystems. They created new surfaces for microbes to grow on, new shadows that altered currents, and new structures that transformed the seafloor into a more varied environment. Many of these organisms probably lived by osmosis, absorbing dissolved nutrients directly across their body surfaces. Without mouths or digestive systems, they relied on the gentle flow of seawater to bring nourishment. Others may have hosted symbiotic microbes, much like corals today. These microbes could provide food through photosynthesis or other chemical processes, sharing their products with the larger host. In this way, even the simplest organisms embodied cooperation, not only between their own cells, but also with microscopic partners. One important aspect of these early forms was their immobility. Most were sessile, fixed in place on the seafloor. They did not swim or crawl, but depended on the steady rhythm of currents to deliver what they needed. This stillness is part of their story. Life's first multicellular bodies were not predators, chasing prey, but gentle absorbers of nutrients, quietly shaping the marine landscape. Their existence reminds us that survival does not always require speed or aggression. Sometimes it requires only patience and stability. Over time, greater variety appeared. Some organisms formed tubular structures, standing upright like small chimneys. Others grew in branching patterns, spreading across the sediment. There is debate among scientists about how to classify them. Some think they were early animals, related to modern sponges, cnidarians, or worms. Others suggest they may represent entire lineages that later went extinct, leaving no modern descendants. Whatever their exact place, they show that life was experimenting with forms, exploring the possibilities of multicellular design. Sponges, among the earliest true animals, also began to appear in these seas. Unlike the frond-like ediacaran organisms, sponges had specialized cells for filtering water. They drew water through tiny pores, capturing bacteria and organic particles, and then expelled the water back out. This filtering lifestyle made sponges important recyclers in marine ecosystems, and they remain so to this day. Their simple but effective design demonstrates that complexity is not always necessary for success. Cnidarians, creatures related to modern jellyfish, corals, and sea anemones likely, also have roots in these early seas. With soft, gelatinous bodies and stinging cells, they represented another step toward diversity. Their ability to float or drift in the water column expanded life's reach beyond the seafloor. In them, mobility began to emerge, though still limited and gentle. These drifting forms gave the ocean new textures, adding vertical layers to ecosystems that had once been confined mostly to the bottom dot. As these organisms spread, they reshaped the marine environment in subtle ways. By growing larger, they changed the flow of water over the seafloor. By filtering particles, they cleared the water, allowing more light to penetrate. By creating surfaces, they provided habitats for microbes and other small creatures. Step by step, the ocean became more complex, filled with interactions that had not existed before. The rise of early multicellular organisms also carried lessons about vulnerability. Without skeletons or shells, their bodies were fragile. Many were pressed into sediments and preserved only as faint impressions. They were easily damaged by currents or burial. Their softness shows that strength is not always the first priority. In evolution, sometimes existing softly in balance with the environment is enough. These delicate fossils whisper of a time when life had not yet developed defenses, when existence itself was an experiment, tentative yet persistent. It is calming to think of these seas filled not with dramatic predators, but with gentle, slow-moving, or immobile forms. The rhythm was unhurried. The pace of life measured not in chases or escapes, but in the steady flow of water and the gradual growth of bodies. Diversity was beginning, but it was a quiet diversity, like the soft unfolding of patterns in a tide pool. These early multicellular organisms remind us that progress in evolution is not always about competition. It is also about cooperation, stability, and endurance. By simply existing, by persisting over millions of years, they laid the groundwork for what would come later. Without their experiments in body plans and lifestyles, the Cambrian explosion of forms could not have occurred. Even though most of these early lineages eventually disappeared, their role was essential. They represent the bridge between a world of microbes and a world of animals. They were the first chapter in the book of visible life, the moment when the oceans began to hold creatures large enough to be seen without a microscope. In their stillness, they prepared the way for movement. In their simplicity, they prepared the way for complexity. When you reflect on these first organisms in the seas, you may sense a gentle continuity. Just as they depended on the rhythm of currents, so too do we depend on the rhythm of breath. Just as they lived by patience and balance, so too do we find rest in slowing down. Their story is not only a scientific account, but also a reminder that life often begins quietly, in softness and in calm. After the long, quiet ages of soft-bodied organisms drifting in the seas, a new chapter unfolded in Earth's history. About 541 million years ago, the Cambrian period began, and with it came an extraordinary expansion of life forms. Over tens of millions of years, not suddenly, but in a gradual flowering, the diversity of animals increased in ways the planet had never seen before. This event is known as the Cambrian explosion, not in the sense of violence or sudden noise, but in the sense of a bloom, a great unfolding of possibilities. The Cambrian explosion was not a single moment, but a long interval of experimentation. Organisms tried new body structures, new ways of moving, and new strategies for feeding and survival. Before this time, most life had been limited to simple shapes, flat fronds, immobile mats, or drifting jelly-like bodies. But in the Cambrian seas, skeletons appeared, eyes developed, jaws and limbs emerged. The oceans, once quiet fields of gentle forms, became filled with creatures crawling, burrowing, swimming, and sensing their surroundings in new ways. One of the most striking features of this period was the emergence of hard parts, shells, exoskeletons, and spines. These structures provided protection, strength, and support. For the first time, animals could leave durable fossils in abundance. Trilobites, with their segmented exoskeletons, became some of the most iconic creatures of this era. They scuttled along the seafloor, using jointed legs to search for food or burrow into the sediment. Their varied shapes and sizes reveal how evolution was exploring many designs at once. Alongside trilobites lived a wide array of other animals. Worms developed burrowing habits, reshaping the seafloor by churning sediments and creating new habitats. Sponges grew more complex, filtering vast amounts of water. Early mollusks appeared, some with coiled shells, others with simple plates. Creatures known as anomalocaridids swam through the water with flapping lobes, using grasping appendages to catch prey. Although they may sound formidable, their presence illustrates a broader pattern. The Cambrian was a time when ecosystems began to take on roles that still exist today: herbivores, filter feeders, predators, and scavengers. The evolution of eyes was another profound development. Simple light-sensitive cells had existed before, but in the Cambrian, more sophisticated visual organs emerged. Trilobites possessed compound eyes, similar to those of modern insects and crustaceans, allowing them to detect movement and navigate complex environments. The rise of vision likely encouraged further innovations: camouflage, armor, and new ways of moving. Step by step, life became more interactive, more aware of surroundings, more dynamic. This increase in diversity also reflected changes in Earth's environment. Rising oxygen levels in the oceans provided more energy for animals to grow larger and more active. The breakup of supercontinents created shallow seas with many ecological niches. Nutrients from erosion enriched these waters, feeding plankton and supporting food webs. Conditions converged to allow experimentation, and life responded by exploring every available path. The Cambrian explosion also produced many body plans that persist today. Biologists group animals into major lineages called phyla, each defined by fundamental structures such as symmetry, body cavities, or skeletal arrangements. Most of the phyla that exist now: arthropods, mollusks, annelids, chordates, and many others first appeared during the Cambrian. This does not mean that modern species existed then, but the blueprints of their bodies were established. In this sense. The Cambrian was less about the sudden arrival of countless species and more about the quiet setting of life's architectural foundation. Chordates, the lineage that would one day lead to vertebrates, also appeared in this period. Fossils like Pikaia show simple, fish-like creatures with notochords, flexible rods that provided support and movement. They were small and unassuming, yet they represented the first steps toward the long line that would eventually include fish, amphibians, reptiles, birds, and mammals. Their presence in the Cambrian reminds us that even the most complex organisms have humble beginnings. It is important to see the Cambrian explosion not as chaos, but as a gradual flowering. Over about 20 to 25 million years, life diversified into many forms. From our perspective, this is a brief moment, but in evolutionary time, it was still an extended process. The term explosion can be misleading. It suggests suddenness. In truth, the Cambrian was more like a sunrise, with light spreading slowly across the horizon, revealing new shapes and colors in the living world. Fossil sites like the Burgess, shale in Canada, and the Xinjiang deposits in China provide vivid windows into this time. Preserved in fine sediments, these fossils show intricate details of soft tissues, from delicate limbs to internal organs. They reveal creatures unlike anything alive today, yet also strangely familiar in their patterns. The Burgess shale's Opabinia, with 5 eyes and a long flexible proboscis, may seem strange, but it reflects the openness of evolution to experiment. Most of these experiments did not last. They represent lineages that disappeared. But their presence shows the creativity of life when given space and opportunity. The Cambrian seas must have felt alive in a new way. Not only were there more organisms, but they interacted in richer networks. Predators hunted prey. Prey evolved defenses. Filter feeders cleared the water, and burrowers reshaped the seafloor. The marine environment became layered with activity, from the bottom sediment to the open water. This complexity brought stability to ecosystems, as energy could flow along many pathways. Yet even in this dynamic time, the rhythm of life was not frantic. From a calm perspective, the Cambrian explosion was simply another chapter in the patient unfolding of evolution. Each adaptation, each new body plan, was tested not over days or years, but over millions of years. Success meant persistence. Failure meant disappearance, but both outcomes contributed to the overall balance. There was no hurry, only the steady rhythm of variation and selection, repeating like the gentle rise and fall of breath. The legacy of the Cambrian explosion remains with us. The animals you know today, whether insects, fish, birds, or humans, trace their origins to this time of innovation. The basic blueprints were set, and evolution has been refining them ever since. Even creatures that seem alien in their forms remind us of the shared ancestry of life, the deep roots that connect the present to the ancient seas. When you reflect on the Cambrian explosion, imagine not a violent burst, but a quiet bloom underwater. Picture countless small experiments in shape and function, carried forward by currents, tested by time, and filtered by survival. From this bloom came the tapestry of animal life, woven slowly, patiently, into the oceans of Earth. It was not sudden noise, but the calm expansion of possibilities, and it continues to echo in every living being today. For hundreds of millions of years, life was confined to the oceans. The seas offered stability, nutrients, and protection from harsh sunlight. Water supported bodies, carried food, and buffered temperature changes. On land, conditions seemed inhospitable. Dry air, intense radiation, shifting climates, and surfaces without the gentle support of water. Yet slowly, cautiously, life began to extend beyond the shorelines. The movement onto land was not sudden or uniform, but a gradual series of steps. Each adaptation opened new possibilities, and each success laid the groundwork for the next. First pioneers of land were not animals, but plants and their microbial partners. Long before forests or grasses, tiny mats of algae and bacteria grew at the edges of water. These simple communities stabilized sediments and captured sunlight. Over time, some algae adapted to survive brief periods of drying, clinging to rocks or moist soil. Their resilience foreshadowed the evolution of true land plants. The earliest land plants, appearing over 470 million years ago, were small and simple. They lacked roots, leaves, or stems as we know them today. Instead, they were little more than low mats or thread-like structures, dependent on constant moisture. These plants spread across damp environments, creating a thin green film on the land. Though modest, their presence began to change the planet. By photosynthesizing on land, they captured carbon dioxide directly from the atmosphere and released oxygen. They also contributed to the weathering of rocks, gradually forming soil that could support more complex vegetation. As plants became more established, they evolved new features that allowed them to venture further from water. One of the most important was the development of a waxy cuticle, a thin protective layer that reduced water loss. Another was the formation of structures called stomata, tiny openings that could open and close to regulate gas exchange without losing too much moisture. Roots and vascular tissues appeared, allowing plants to anchor themselves more deeply and to transport water and nutrients efficiently. With these adaptations, plants could grow taller and spread into drier environments. By the late Devonian period, vast forests of early trees, such as Archaeopteris, covered the land, shading soils and altering climates. Where plants went, animals followed. The first to arrive were arthropods, creatures with jointed legs and exoskeletons. Millipede-like animals, scorpions, and early relatives of insects crawled onto land, feeding on decaying plant material and other small organisms. They're hard. Exoskeletons helped prevent water loss, while jointed legs allowed them to navigate uneven terrain. For these animals, land offered new resources and fewer predators than in the sea. Yet the most dramatic transition was made by vertebrates. Fish had thrived in the Devonian seas, developing strong fins, jaws, and internal skeletons. Some groups, like lobe-finned fish, evolved fins with sturdy bones that could support weight. Living in shallow, oxygen-poor waters, they also developed lungs in addition to gills, giving them the ability to breathe air. Gradually, these adaptations prepared them for short excursions onto land, where they could escape predators, find food, or move between shrinking pools. The earliest true tetrapods four-limbed. Vertebrates appeared around 360 million years ago. Creatures like Acanthostega and Ichthyostega still lived largely in water, but their limbs allowed them to push through vegetation or crawl onto muddy banks. Over millions of years, tetrapods diversified, giving rise to amphibians, reptiles, birds, and mammals. Their move onto land was one of evolution's great experiments, opening entire continents to exploration. This transition was not easy. On land, animals had to solve new challenges, supporting their bodies without the buoyancy of water, keeping their skin from drying out, reproducing without relying on water to carry sperm or eggs. Amphibians, for example, remained tied to moist environments, laying eggs in water and keeping skin damp. Reptiles eventually solved this with the evolution of the amniotic egg, a self-contained package that could be laid on land. This innovation freed them from aquatic reproduction and allowed them to colonize drier habitats. The presence of plants on land also made life more hospitable for animals. Plants provided food, shelter, and oxygen. Forests created shade and moderated climates. Root systems stabilized soils, preventing erosion. The rise of terrestrial ecosystems was not the work of a single group, but the result of plants, fungi, and animals all contributing to a balanced system. Mycorrhizal fungi, living in partnership with plant roots, played an essential role in helping plants absorb nutrients. This hidden cooperation beneath the soil was as vital as the visible greenery above it. As land ecosystems matured, they transformed Earth itself. Plants drew down atmospheric carbon dioxide, lowering global temperatures. Their remains accumulated as organic matter, forming layers that would eventually become coal. Forests influenced rainfall patterns and created habitats for countless species. The shift from barren landscapes to green continents was one of the most profound environmental changes in Earth's history. It is calming to imagine this transformation, not as a sudden conquest, but as a patient unfolding. Small algae at the water's edge, moss-like plants spreading across damp ground, arthropods creeping among them, fish lifting their heads above the surface. Step by step, life extended its reach, never in haste, always adapting slowly to new challenges. Even today, the legacy of this transition surrounds you. Every forest, every field, every insect that lands on a leaf is part of the story that began when life first touched the land. The breath you take owes itself to the oxygen produced by land plants. The soil beneath your feet exists because plants and fungi broke down rocks into fertile ground. The diversity of terrestrial animals, including ourselves, is the result of those first hesitant steps onto shore. When you reflect on life's move onto land, you may sense the quiet determination it required. The challenges were immense, but they were met with patience, resilience, and cooperation. Life did not rush. It adapted, layer by layer, over millions of years. In this calm unfolding, the Earth was transformed from a world of oceans to a world of continents alive with forests, rivers, and countless creatures. It is a reminder that even the greatest transitions often begin with small, steady steps, repeated gently over time. After the first plants crept onto land, forming low mats and moss-like colonies, life faced a new question. How could plants grow taller, spread further, and thrive away from constant moisture? The answer came through the quiet innovation of vascular tissue. This development, subtle at first, opened the way for plants to expand across continents, to reach toward the sky, and to transform bare ground into forests. Vascular tissue refers to specialized systems inside plants that transport water, nutrients, and food. Two main structures evolved: xylem, which carried water and dissolved minerals upward from the roots, and phloem, which distributed sugars produced in leaves through photosynthesis. With these networks in place, plants no longer depended on every cell touching moisture directly. They could grow taller, lifting leaves into the sunlight, while roots drew water from the soil below. This internal circulation was like a gentle breath within the plant, a rhythm that allowed life to stretch beyond its earlier limits. The first vascular plants appeared more than 420 million years ago, during the Silurian period. They were modest, in size simple stems without true leaves or roots, only a few centimeters tall. But even these small pioneers were different from their non-vascular ancestors. They could colonize drier areas, endure more varied conditions and reproduce more widely. Over millions of years, their forms became more elaborate. Leaves developed to capture light more efficiently, roots to anchor them and absorb water, and branching systems to explore space above and below ground. By the Devonian period, around 400 million years ago, the Earth began to see larger plants rising from the land. Lycophytes, horsetails, and ferns spread into dense thickets, some growing meters high. Their spores drifted on the wind, colonizing new environments. In these lush green landscapes, the first true forests began to form. The canopy of leaves created shade, the roots bound soils, and the presence of tall plants reshaped wind and rainfall patterns. For the first time, land was not just dotted with greenery, but enveloped in it. Forests brought profound changes to the earth. By capturing carbon dioxide through photosynthesis, they lowered greenhouse gas levels in the atmosphere. This, in turn, cooled the planet, leading to ice ages that reshaped continents and seas. At the same time, plants released vast amounts of oxygen, enriching the air and supporting the growth of larger and more active animals. The balance of gases in the atmosphere was no longer set only by microbes in the sea, but by towering forests across the land. The impact of forests extended below ground as well. Roots penetrated rocks, breaking them into smaller particles. Fungi, living in partnership with plants in what are called mycorrhizal relationships, helped extract nutrients and recycle organic matter. Together, plants and fungi generated soils rich enough to support further growth. Over time, the Earth's surface changed from barren rock to fertile landscapes. Layered with organic material, the trees of the Devonian and Carboniferous periods were not like modern oaks or pines. Many belong to groups that are now rare or extinct. Some lycophytes grew more than 30 meters tall, their trunks covered with diamond-shaped leaf scars. Horsetails, much larger than today's small species, formed towering groves. Seed ferns, with fronds resembling those of true ferns but producing seeds, represented another important step. These ancient forests may have looked alien to our eyes, yet they created the first great canopies of shade and shelter. Forests also provided habitats for animals venturing onto land. Arthropods such as millipedes and scorpions found refuge among roots and leaf litter. Amphibians, emerging from the water, discovered new hunting grounds in damp undergrowth. The three-dimensional complexity of forests supported diverse ecosystems where countless interactions unfolded quietly. Insects, appearing during this time, began to pollinate some plants and recycle detritus, weaving themselves into the new web of life. The remains of these vast forests left a legacy that endures even now. Over millions of years, fallen trunks and leaves accumulated in swamps, where oxygen-poor conditions slowed decay. Buried under sediments, these layers transformed into coal. The coal deposits we mine today are remnants of those ancient forests, storing sunlight captured hundreds of millions of years ago. In this way, the quiet photosynthesis of ancient plants still influences human lives, fueling energy systems in the present. The rise of vascular plants and forests also reveals a lesson in balance. As plants expanded and absorbed carbon dioxide, they cooled the climate significantly. During the late Carboniferous and Permian periods, ice sheets grew and sea levels fell. Life responded with new adaptations, but the connection is clear. Vegetation is not only a passive presence, but an active force shaping the planet. The rhythm of forests breathing in carbon dioxide and exhaling oxygen became a driver of Earth's climate cycles. When reflecting on these first forests, you may imagine not the noise of chains or engines, at the gentle rustle of fronds in ancient breezes. The air would have been thick with oxygen, moist with transpiration, filled with the quiet hum of early insects. Roots would have spread like fingers through the soil, holding the land together. In this serene imagery, forests become not only scientific facts, but symbols of patience and endurance, growing slowly, shaping worlds silently. Even now, every forest you see is part of that legacy. The maple in a city park, the pine on a mountain slope, the rainforest canopy, all carry the vascular systems first established more than 400 million years ago. Every breath of oxygen is a reminder of that ancient innovation. In your own body, the branching vessels of your circulatory system echo the same principle, transporting vital materials through a network, sustaining life through connection. The greening of the continents was one of evolution's most transformative chapters, yet it happened without hurry. Tiny vascular strands became stems, stems became trees, trees gathered into forests, forests reshaped the earth. Each step was measured in millions of years, each step part of a rhythm that continues to this day. When you think of vascular plants and the first forests, let the image be one of calm expansion. From small beginnings, greenery spread gently across the land, turning barren rock into living landscapes. The forests did not rush. They grew slowly, in silence, breathing in rhythm with the earth. Their story is not only about plants, but about the soft power of persistence, the ability of life to transform the planet simply by growing, leaf by leaf, root by root, over vast stretches of time. As forests spread across the continents, covering the land with vast expanses of greenery, a new chapter of life began in the small spaces between leaves and stems, in the litter of fallen fronds, and in the air above flowers. This chapter belonged to insects, creatures whose small bodies carried immense influence. Though tiny compared to towering trees or ancient amphibians, insects became some of the most successful organisms in Earth's history. Their arrival and eventual partnership with plants through pollination created a bond that endures to this day, shaping nearly every ecosystem on the planet. Insects first appeared more than 400 million years ago. During the Devonian period, they descended from arthropods, animals with jointed legs and exoskeletons that had already colonized the land in the form of millipede-like creatures and early scorpions. Insects distinguished themselves by their smaller size, lighter exoskeletons, and eventually their ability to fly. These traits allowed them to explore niches unavailable to larger animals. They could feed on delicate plant tissues, hide in tiny crevices, and disperse widely. The earliest insects were wingless and likely resembled modern silverfish, small and fast-moving. They fed on decaying plant matter, spores, and detritus, contributing to the recycling of nutrients in the new terrestrial ecosystems. As plants diversified, so too did insects, adapting to new food sources and opportunities. Around 350 million years ago, wings evolved, a moment that transformed insects into pioneers of the skies. With flight, they could escape predators, find mates over greater distances, and spread to new habitats. Dragonfly-like insects with wingspans of more than half a meter soared through Carboniferous forests, dominating the air. The partnership between insects and plants deepened with the evolution of seeds and later flowers. Early plants had relied on wind or water to carry their pollen, a process effective but inefficient. Insects, already abundant and mobile, offered a more reliable solution. By visiting plants to feed on nectar or pollen, they inadvertently carried grains of pollen from one plant to another. This mutual exchange gave plants higher chances of reproduction and provided insects with a steady food source. Over time, plants evolved structures to attract insect partners, colors, scents, and shapes designed to guide them. Insects, in turn, developed specialized mouthparts, behaviors, and senses to access plant rewards. This quiet partnership is known as pollination, and it remains one of the most important relationships in nature. Nearly all flowering plants depend on animals for pollination, and insects are the primary carriers. Bees, butterflies, moths, beetles, and flies each play their part, visiting blossoms, feeding gently, and unknowingly ensuring the continuation of plant lineages. It is not an act of intention, but of interaction, yet the result is harmony. Entire ecosystems, from meadows to rainforests, owe their richness to this exchange. Pollination illustrates the power of cooperation in evolution. Neither plants nor insects designed the relationship. It emerged naturally, refined over millions of years. The rhythm of flowers opening and insects visiting became synchronized, a cycle repeated season after season. Plants adapted their flowering times to match insect activity. Insects learned to recognize colors and patterns that promised nourishment. Over time, the two became inseparable. The diversity of insects reflects the flexibility of this partnership. Beetles became some of the earliest pollinators, chewing their way through flowers while still transferring pollen. Bees, later evolving from wasp-like ancestors, perfected the role with their hairy bodies, which collect pollen efficiently. Butterflies and moths added elegance, sipping nectar with long proboscises and spreading pollen as they moved. Each group brought its own rhythm to the cycle, expanding the possibilities of reproduction for plants and creating new food webs. The effects of insect pollination went far beyond the individual species involved. By increasing plant diversity, it supported the growth of complex ecosystems. Forests gained layers of shrubs, herbs, and flowering trees. Meadows and grasslands flourished. With more plants came more food for herbivores, and with more herbivores came predators, scavengers, and decomposers. A quiet chain of interactions unfolded, all supported by the simple act of insects carrying pollen. Even in today's world, the impact of this ancient partnership is profound. Much of the food humans eat, fruits, nuts, vegetables, depends on insect pollination. Every orchard, every field of blooming crops is connected to this lineage of cooperation that began hundreds of millions of years ago. Each buzzing bee or fluttering butterfly carries within it the history of that partnership, repeated endlessly through time. From a calm perspective, the story of insects and pollination is one of persistence rather than drama. Insects did not conquer the land with force, but by exploring its smallest stasis. They succeeded not through size, but through adaptability. Plants did not dominate by strength, but by offering nourishment and attracting helpers. Together, they created a balance that endures, a cycle as steady as breath. It is soothing to imagine a carboniferous forest filled with dragonfly-like giants gliding slowly between trees, or a meadow in later ages with bees drifting from flower to flower, carrying life unknowingly on their bodies. The hum of wings, the gentle opening of petals, the soft exchange of pollen, all these images reflect a quiet harmony that has shaped Earth's biosphere. When you think of insects and the story of pollination, let it be a reminder of cooperation's subtle strength. Small creatures, often overlooked, have built systems that sustain entire worlds. Flowers blooming, fruits forming, seeds spreading, each depends on their tireless movements. This partnership, born of simple needs and repeated interactions, stands as one of evolution's calmest and most enduring achievements. as plants and insects spread across the continents, creating green forests and buzzing ecosystems. Vertebrates, animals with backbones, were preparing their own quiet transformation. For millions of years, fish had ruled the waters, adapting. Fins for movement, jaws for feeding, and lungs for breathing air in shallow pools. But eventually, some of their descendants began to test the margins between water and land. Their slow experiments gave rise first to amphibians and later to reptiles, two groups that would shape the course of life on land in profound ways. The earliest amphibian-like creatures evolved from lobe-finned fish during the Devonian period, more than 360 million years ago. These fish already possessed features that hinted at a future beyond water: strong fins with bone structures resembling simple limbs, lungs that allowed them to breathe air, and bodies capable of supporting themselves in shallow environments. Some lived in swamps and river deltas, where oxygen levels were low and lungs provided an advantage. Others used their sturdy fins to push through vegetation or to move from one drying pool to another. Slowly, step by cautious step, the transition toward land began. Creatures such as Acanthostega and Ichthyostega reveal this intermediate stage. They had limbs with digits, yet still retained features of fish, such as tails with fin rays and gills for underwater breathing. They were not fully terrestrial, but they represent the first tetrapods, four-limbed vertebrates that could navigate both water and land. Their bodies carried the marks of compromise, suited to swimming, yet able to prop themselves on muddy banks. In them, we see the patient experimentation of evolution, adapting gradually rather than leaping abruptly. As time passed, true amphibians emerged. These animals retained close ties to water. They laid soft eggs that lacked protective shells, requiring moisture to survive. Their skin, thin and permeable, allowed for gas exchange but demanded damp environments. Frogs, salamanders, and their ancient relatives thrived in swamps and wetlands, feeding on insects and small invertebrates. Amphibians became important players in the new ecosystems of the Carboniferous forests, where humidity and abundant vegetation provided ideal conditions. Amphibians illustrate both the promise and the limits of adaptation. They could move onto land, breathe air, and hunt away from the water's edge. Yet they remained bound to moisture for reproduction and survival. Their eggs had to be laid in ponds or streams. Their skin required dampness. They were pioneers, but their dependence on water kept them tethered. To move further inland, life needed another innovation. That innovation came with the reptiles. Reptiles evolved from amphibian ancestors more than 310 million years ago, during the late Carboniferous. Their key breakthrough was the amniotic egg, a self-contained structure with membranes and a protective shell. Unlike amphibian eggs, which dried quickly, amniotic eggs could survive in drier environments. Inside, the developing embryo had its own watery world, nourished and protected until it was ready to hatch. This adaptation freed reptiles from the need to return to water for reproduction. Alongside the egg, reptiles developed other traits that suited them for life on land. Their skin became covered with scales, reducing water loss and providing protection. Their bodies grew stronger, with more advanced lungs and skeletal structures that allowed efficient movement on dry ground. With these changes, reptiles could spread into habitats where amphibians could not thrive: open plains, deserts, and upland regions far from rivers and lakes. Reptiles diversified into many forms. Some remained small, feeding on insects and plants. Others grew larger, hunting amphibians or competing with them for resources. Over time, reptiles gave rise to lineages that would dominate later eras, dinosaurs, birds, and mammals. Yet even in their earliest days, their resilience and independence set them apart. They no longer needed constant contact with water. They could bask in the sun, seek shelter in dry soils, and reproduce safely on land. The rise of amphibians and reptiles reshaped ecosystems. Amphibians linked water and land, consuming insects and serving as prey for larger animals. Reptiles expanded the boundaries of terrestrial life, pushing into new landscapes and opening fresh ecological niches. Together, they ensured that vertebrates would not remain confined to the sea, but would become integral parts of land-based communities. It is calming to picture these ancient landscapes. Dense forests of giant ferns and lycophytes, damp undergrowth, alive with insects, streams lined with amphibians, and the slow movements of reptiles across sunlit clearings. The pace of life was measured not in sudden leaps, but in quiet persistence, animals breathing, moving, and adapting over millions of years. Each small adjustment carried forward, each survival adding to the rhythm of evolution. The story of amphibians and reptiles is also a reminder of continuity. Modern frogs still echo the early adaptations of their ancestors, calling from ponds and laying eggs in water. Modern reptiles still carry the protective scales and eggs that freed their lineage from moisture. In every croak, in every lizard basking on a rock, the long history of this transition is alive. From the perspective of calm science, the shift from water to land was not conquest but adjustment. Amphibians found balance in both worlds, bridging the gap. Reptiles discovered independence, carrying their own water within eggs and shielding themselves from dryness. Both strategies worked, both endured, and both contributed to the unfolding of life's story. When you reflect on amphibians and reptiles, imagine the patience of these adaptations. No single creature leapt from sea to desert in one generation. Instead, countless small changes accumulated, tested by time, shaped by environment. Like the slow rhythm of breath, this transition unfolded gradually, quietly, yet with lasting consequence. From it arose the foundations for the age of reptiles, the rise of dinosaurs, and eventually the emergence of mammals and humans. Among all the adaptations life has explored, the ability to fly stands as one of the most remarkable. To rise into the air, to move through space unbound by the ground or water, required new structures and strategies. It was not achieved quickly, or in a single step. Instead, the story of flight is one of gradual changes, scales becoming feathers, limbs becoming wings, bodies becoming lighter, until finally, the skies themselves became habitats for life. Birds, with their grace and diversity, are the living heirs of this long history. The roots of bird evolution lie among reptiles, particularly a group known as theropod dinosaurs. These were bipedal, often agile creatures, some small, some large, and many already showing traits that foreshadowed flight. Fossils reveal that feathers did not appear suddenly on fully flying birds, but long before, on dinosaurs that still walked on the ground. At first, feathers were simple filaments, perhaps, for insulation or display. Over time, they became more complex, branching and layering, capable of trapping air and providing lift. The first feathers were not designed for flight. They likely served to keep bodies warm, shielding small dinosaurs from heat loss. Some may have been used for signaling, their colors and patterns attracting mates or warning rivals. Only later did feathers adapt to aerodynamics, showing once again how evolution repurposes existing traits for new uses. In the calm rhythm of time, features designed for one function often find another as feathers became more elaborate, Limbs also changed. The forelimbs of certain theropods grew longer, their bones reshaping into frameworks that could support feathers. Muscles attached in new ways, giving strength for flapping. Tails shortened, balancing the body for controlled movement. Hollow bones reduced weight without sacrificing strength. These adjustments were not dramatic leaps, but gentle refinements, each offering small advantages that accumulated over generations. The most famous early bird is Archaeopteryx, known from fossils, about 150 million years old. It carried both reptilian and avian features, teeth in its beak, a long bony tail, clawed fingers, but also well-developed feathers and wings. Whether Archaeopteryx was a strong flyer or more of a glider is debated, but it represents a transitional form, a snapshot of evolution's slow weaving of traits. To imagine it is to see the balance between past and future, between ground and sky. Flight itself may have originated in several ways. One possibility is the trees down model, where small feathered dinosaurs climbed trees and used their feathers to glide down, eventually evolving powered flight. Another is the ground up model, where running animals used feathered limbs to gain lift, perhaps first for balance or to help climb slopes. In either case, feathers, wings, and light skeletons gradually transformed creatures of the ground into creatures of the air. Once true flight was achieved, new opportunities opened. Flying animals could escape predators, search widely for food, and migrate across great distances. They could reach fruits, seeds, and insects unavailable to grounded creatures. They could nest in trees, safe from many dangers below. The skies became not just pathways, but ecosystems, filled with interactions as intricate as those in forests or oceans. Birds, diversified into countless forms, from tiny hummingbirds hovering on rapid wing beats to great eagles soaring on thermal currents. Each adaptation of wing shape, beak design, and behavior reflects a different way of life. Nectar feeding, seed cracking, fish catching, scavenging, all are variations built on the foundation of feathers and flight. In this diversity, we see how a single evolutionary innovation can ripple outward, touching every aspect of ecology. It is calming to remember that the elegance of bird flight is not the result of sudden invention, but of countless small steps. Feathers first for warmth, wings first for balance or display, bones first for lightness. Each feature layered gently upon another until together they created the possibility of flight. Like the slow rhythm of breath, these changes accumulated in silence, shaping a future beyond imagination. Birds also carried with them the endurance of their reptilian ancestors. When the age of dinosaurs ended in mass extinction about 66 million years ago, most large reptiles disappeared. Yet some small feathered theropods survived, sheltered by their adaptability, their ability to fly, and their varied diets. From these survivors came modern birds, carrying forward the lineage of dinosaurs in a new form. Every robin, every sparrow, every crow is a living descendant of creatures that once walked among giants. The partnership between birds and plants also grew strong. Many birds spread seeds by eating fruits and releasing them elsewhere. Others pollinate flowers while feeding on nectar. In turn, plants provided food, shelter, and nesting sites. Just as insects once shaped the rise of flowering plants, so too did birds contribute to the spread and survival of vegetation. The cycle of cooperation continued, quiet yet powerful. Even today, the sight or sound of birds often brings calm. Their flight across the sky, their songs in the trees, their presence at dawn and dusk, each connects us to this long history. When you hear the gentle flutter of wings or watch a bird glide effortlessly, you are witnessing the result of hundreds of millions of years of adaptation. What seems graceful and natural today was built slowly, carefully, step by step, from a soothing perspective. The story of birds is a meditation on transformation. Scales became feathers. Grounded animals became flyers. Dinosaurs became robins. And swans. The process required no hurry, no grand design, only the quiet persistence of life exploring possibilities. Like the gradual opening of a flower, flight unfolded in time until the skies were filled with movement. When you think of birds and the evolution of flight, you may imagine not just motion, but lightness itself, bones filled with air, feathers, catching currents, wings shaping invisible paths. Theirs is a story of balance, of harmony between body and air, of life discovering how to move with the wind. In their story, you can sense the calm assurance that change, when given time, can lift even the heaviest of beginnings into the sky. Long after reptiles had secured their place on land, a new lineage began to branch quietly from their ranks. This lineage would eventually give rise to mammals creatures, defined not only by their biology, but by their care, their warmth, and their resilience. The story of mammals is not one of sudden appearance, but of slow refinement, of traits layered gently across deep time until something new emerged. The earliest ancestors of mammals were synapsids, reptile-like creatures that appeared more than 300 million years ago during the late Carboniferous period. Synapsids are recognized by a single opening behind each eye socket in the skull, an adaptation that allowed for stronger jaw muscles. These animals included Dimetrodon, often mistaken for a dinosaur, with its distinctive sail-like back. Though reptilian in appearance, synapsids were already on a path that would diverge from their reptile cousins. Over millions of years, synapsids gave rise to therapsids, sometimes called mammal-like reptiles. Therapsids showed changes in their teeth, jaws, and limbs that foreshadowed true mammals. Their teeth became differentiated into incisors, canines, and molars, specialized for cutting, tearing, and grinding. Their posture shifted from sprawling limbs to more upright stances, allowing more efficient movement. These small refinements accumulated over vast stretches of time, marked the slow progression toward mammalian forms. One of the most important developments was endothermy, ability to maintain a stable internal body temperature through metabolism. Warm-bloodedness, as it is often called, gave mammals an advantage. They could remain active in cooler climates, hunt or forage at night, and survive seasonal changes that constrained cold-blooded animals. To support this metabolic intensity, mammals developed hair or fur, which provided insulation. Even in small, early forms, hair would have helped conserve heat, creating a microclimate close to the skin. Alongside warmth came care. Unlike many reptiles, which lay eggs and leave their young to fend for themselves, early mammals began to invest energy in nurturing offspring. The evolution of milk, secreted by glands to feed the young, created a bond between parent and child. This ensured higher survival rates and allowed offspring to be born at smaller, less developed stages, receiving protection and nourishment as they grew. In this way, reproduction was not simply the production of many eggs, but the sustained care of fewer young. This shift in strategy, though energetically costly, gave mammals resilience in uncertain environments. The jaws and ears of mammals tell another part of the story. In their reptilian ancestors, several bones formed the jaw joint. Over time, some of these bones shifted and reduced, eventually becoming part of the mammalian middle ear, the malleus, incus, and stapes. This transformation provided mammals with more refined hearing, especially of higher frequencies. Better hearing meant improved communication and awareness, valuable for small nocturnal animals navigating in darkness. At the same time, a single bone, the dendary, came to form the lower jaw, strengthening the bite and allowing precise chewing. During the age of dinosaurs, mammals remained small, often no larger than modern shrews or mice. They occupied niches at the edges of ecosystems: burrowers, insect eaters, seed gatherers. Living in the shadows of giant reptiles, they avoided competition by becoming nocturnal, relying on their warm-bloodedness, fur, and acute senses to survive at night. This long period of modest existence shows how evolution can favor patience. For tens of millions of years, mammals did not dominate, but they endured, quietly refining their adaptations. When the mass extinction struck 66 million years ago, ending the reign of non-avian dinosaurs, mammals were poised for expansion. Their small size, varied diets, and adaptable lifestyles allowed them to survive and flourish in the new landscapes. Freed from competition with dinosaurs, they diversified into many forms, some returning to the sea as whales and dolphins, others soaring into the air as bats, and many more adapting to forests, grasslands, and deserts. The mammals we know today, primates, rodents, carnivores, ungulates, are the branches of this great expansion. The traits that define mammals, warmth, hair, milk, differentiated teeth, refined senses, may seem ordinary to us now, but they represent extraordinary solutions in the history of life. Warm-bloodedness allowed activity in all seasons. Hair offered protection and communication. Milk created bonds of care and continuity. Specialized teeth enabled diverse diets, from grazing to hunting. Together, these traits gave mammals flexibility, resilience, and the ability to inhabit environments across the globe. It is soothing to reflect on the image of small, early mammals moving quietly through Jurassic forests, their fur warmed by internal heat, their young nourished with milk, their ears tuned to faint sounds. They did not yet know the dominance they would achieve, but their quiet persistence prepared the way. Their story reminds us that success is not always about size or speed, but about adaptability and endurance. Even now, mammals carry the legacy of these ancient innovations. Every breath of warm air, every heartbeat maintaining body temperature, every gesture of parental care is part of that lineage. Whether it is a lioness protecting her cubs, a bat navigating the night, or a human cradling a child, the same traits echo across species. They are reminders of the calm power of cooperation, warmth, and care. The birth of mammals was not sudden, but a long unfolding of traits: jaws reshaping, bones shifting, fur appearing, warmth sustained, young nurtured. Each step was gentle, each adaptation a quiet experiment tested by time. Like the steady rhythm of breath, mammals emerged through persistence, carrying forward qualities that would shape much of Earth's future. When you think of mammals and the birth of new forms, you may imagine not a triumphant leap, but a patient layering of changes. From reptilian ancestors came warmth. From warmth came care. From care came resilience. And from resilience came diversity, filling the world with creatures large and small. Their story is one of endurance and gentleness, a reminder that even the smallest of beings can, in time, shape the course of life. As mammals spread into every corner of the earth after the age of dinosaurs, one lineage began to develop unique traits that would shape the future of life's story. These were the primates, creatures of grasping hands, forward-looking eyes, and growing social awareness. Their journey was not about domination or conquest, but about connection with their environments, with their young, and with each other. In the calm unfolding of time, primates became specialists in living not alone, but together. The earliest primates appeared more than 55 million years ago in forests that covered much of the planet during the Paleocene and Eocene epochs. These small, tree-dwelling mammals resembled modern lemurs or tarsiers more than humans. They were nocturnal, feeding on insects, fruit, and leaves. Their bodies adapted to arboreal life with flexible joints, long tails for balance, and grasping hands and feet that could cling to branches. Their eyes grew larger, with depth perception that allowed them to judge distances when leaping between trees. These early adaptations formed the foundation of primate success: mobility, vision, and dexterity. But the most important trait of primates was not physical, but social. Living in trees meant living close to others, sharing space and resources. In this environment, communication became vital. Calls, scents, gestures, and eventually facial expressions carried meaning. Grooming, a simple act of cleaning and touching, became a language of trust and connection. Through it, bonds were strengthened, conflicts soothed, and communities stabilized. In primates, social life was not an afterthought, it was a necessity. Over millions of years, primates diversified into many groups. Prosimians, such as lemurs, and lorises, represent some of the earliest branches, maintaining many traits of their ancestors. Later came monkeys, both in the Old World of Africa and Asia, and in the New World of the Americas. Each lineage explored different ways of life, from swinging through trees to walking on the ground, from eating insects to relying on fruit or leaves. With them, primate societies grew more varied, but the theme of connection remained constant. Of the defining shifts was the evolution of larger brains. Compared to most mammals, primates devoted more energy to the development of the brain, especially areas linked to vision, memory, and social interaction. Larger brains allowed more flexible behavior, learning, and problem-solving. They also made possible the complex social structures that became a hallmark of primates. To live in groups required negotiation alliances, hierarchies, friendships, reconciliations. In the quiet rhythm of grooming and the subtle dance of interactions, primates developed cultures of their own. The split between monkeys and apes, occurring around 25 million years ago, marked another step. Apes including gibbons, orangutans, gorillas, chimpanzees, and eventually humans lost their tails, but gained even greater mobility in their shoulders and arms. They could swing through trees with ease, but they also adapted to more varied environments. Apes, with their larger brains and longer lifespans, developed even more complex social lives. Their groups became communities where learning and cooperation were essential. Gorillas, for example, live in family groups led by a silverback male who protects and guides. Chimpanzees form larger communities where alliances and cooperation determine leadership. Bonobos, close relatives of chimpanzees, emphasize bonding and reconciliation, often using peaceful interactions to maintain harmony. Each species reflects a different way of living together, but all show the same principle. Survival depends not just on individuals, but on relationships. The development of social bonds in primates had far-reaching effects. By relying on groups, primates could defend against predators, share food, and care for young more effectively. Infants were not left alone, but nurtured within communities. Older individuals could teach or guide the younger. Cooperation increased the chances of survival for everyone. In this way, sociality became as important as physical adaptations. Shaping the course of evolution. It is soothing to think of ancient forests filled with the quiet movements of primates' calls, echoing through the trees, grooming sessions under the shade of leaves, young clinging to mothers as groups moved together. The pace of their lives was measured, not rushed. Their societies formed slowly, built on trust, touch, and time. In every interaction, bonds were reinforced and communities strengthened. The story of primates also foreshadows humanity. Our own species did not emerge until much later, but the groundwork was laid in these ancient lineages. Forward-facing eyes gave us depth perception for tools and art. Grasping hands allowed us to shape and create. Large brains enabled language, memory, and imagination. And social bonds provided the framework for cooperation, culture, and shared knowledge. In this sense, the story of humans is inseparable from the story of primates as a whole. Even now, the echoes of primate evolution are present in daily life. The importance of family, the comfort of friendship, the role of community all reflect the social strategies that sustained primates for tens of millions of years. When people gather, share meals, or offer care, they are continuing patterns as old as the forests themselves. The instinct to connect is not new. It is an inheritance. From a calm perspective, the rise of primates is less about physical dominance and more about the quiet strength of relationships. They remind us that life's success often depends not on isolation, but on connection. In every grooming gesture, in every protective embrace, in every cooperative hunt or shared meal, primates demonstrated that bonds could be as vital as breath. You reflect on primates and the story of social bonds. Imagine the steady rhythm of life in ancient forests. Picture groups moving together, calling softly, resting in the shade. Their survival was not about solitary strength, but about the calm assurance of community. From them, the roots of humanity's social nature grew, reminding us that to be alive is not only to exist, but to belong. From the long history of primates, a new lineage eventually emerged that began to walk tall on the open plains. This species was Homo erectus, meaning upright human. Appearing nearly 2 million years ago, Homo erectus represents one of the most important chapters in our ancestry. They were not the first to stand on 2 legs, nor the first to use tools, but they carried these traits forward with greater refinement. In their persistence, their adaptability, and their quiet mastery of fire, they became true pioneers of the human story. The body of Homo erectus was built for walking and endurance. Unlike earlier hominins, their legs were long and strong with joints and muscles designed for efficient movement across wide landscapes. Their pelvis and spine balanced the body upright, allowing them to walk and run with stability. Standing close to modern human height, with robust frames, they could travel long distances. This mobility allowed Homo erectus to spread far beyond Africa, reaching Asia and Europe. In fact, they were among the first hominins to leave the continent of their origin, showing a resilience that carried them into diverse environments. Their brains were larger than those of earlier hominins, averaging around 900 to 1,100 cubic centimeters, though still smaller than those of modern humans. This increase in brain size supported more complex behaviors, particularly in tool-making and social life. Yet the expansion was gradual, reflecting evolution's slow rhythm. Each generation carried small refinements, tested by the challenges of survival. One of the defining features of Homo erectus was their use of tools. Earlier species, such as Homo habilis, had already shaped simple stone flakes for cutting, but Homo erectus refined these into more symmetrical and standardized Forms. They crafted hand axes and cleavers from carefully chosen stones, striking flakes with precision to create sharp edges. These Herculean tools were versatile, used for butchering animals, processing plants, and shaping wood. The skill involved suggests planning, learning, and teaching within groups. Tool-making became a shared knowledge, passed along like a gentle rhythm from one generation to the next. The quiet but profound mastery of fire is also linked to Homo erectus. Evidence suggests that they were among the first to control flames, though not necessarily to create them at will. Natural fires, sparked by lightning, could be maintained and carried. Fire provided warmth during cold nights, protection from predators, and a way to cook food. Cooking softened meat and plants, making them easier to chew and digest. This, in turn, may have supported further brain growth by providing more efficient nutrition. Around campfires, groups could gather, extending their activities into the evening. In this way, fire not only changed diet, but also shaped community life, for Homo erectus was not hurried, but steady. They lived in small groups, moving across landscapes in search of food and water. Their diet was varied fruits, nuts, tubers, and meat from hunting or scavenging. They likely cooperated in hunts, using tools and coordination to bring down animals. Social bonds were important, just as they had been for earlier primates. Care for the young, cooperation in gathering, and shared protection strengthened their chances of survival. The fossil record reveals that Homo erectus endured for nearly 2 million years, an extraordinary span of time compared to many species. They adapted to shifting climates, from African savannas to Asian forests and European plains. This endurance reflects flexibility and patience. They did not dominate with speed or sudden leaps in technology, but with persistence and quiet resilience. It is calming to imagine their world. Groups moving slowly across open landscapes, hand axes carried at their sides, fires glowing softly in evening camps. The pace of their lives was measured, guided by the rhythms of seasons, migrations of animals, and cycles of light and dark. Their tools chipped from stone, their fire nurtured from sparks, their bonds sustained by touch and presence. These simple acts carried profound meaning. The legacy of Homo erectus is written not only in bones and tools, but in the very structure of human life today. Our capacity for endurance walking, our reliance on fire and cooking, our sharing of knowledge through teaching all trace back to them. They were not yet us, but they laid the foundation upon which our species would be built. From a calm perspective, their story is not one of conquest, but of continuity. They show that humanity's path was not a sudden rise, but a long journey of small, steady steps. Fire did not appear in an instant. It was tended slowly. Tools did not leap from crude to perfect. They were shaped, refined, and shared. Survival did not depend on isolation, but on community, on moving together across the land. When you reflect on Homo erectus and the dawn of tools and fire, imagine a quiet evening under ancient skies. Flames flicker gently, warming faces and softening. Food. Stones lie shaped by careful hands, their edges gleaming in the firelight. Around that circle, voices murmur, bonds strengthen, and knowledge passes forward. In this calm scene lies the essence of their contribution: persistence, cooperation, and the gentle beginnings of culture. From the long line of hominins stretching back through Homo erectus and earlier ancestors, a new species eventually arose, Homo sapiens. Appearing in Africa around 300,000 years ago, these early humans carried with them the physical traits of their lineage, but also something more: the capacity for symbolic thought, complex language, and culture. Their story is not one of sudden brilliance, but of gradual unfolding, as small steps in communication and imagination grew into the vast networks of knowledge and expression that define us today. Physically, Homo sapiens were well adapted to endurance and versatility. Their bodies were lighter than those of earlier hominins, with long limbs suited for walking and running across varied terrains. Their brains, averaging around 1,300 to 1,500 cubic centimeters, were not just large but organized in ways that supported advanced reasoning, planning, and memory. The shape of their skulls allowed for expanded frontal lobes, regions associated with decision-making and abstract thought. But anatomy alone did not make them unique. What set them apart was how they used their minds together. Language was at the heart of this transformation. Earlier hominins likely had vocalizations and gestures for communication, but Homo sapiens developed structured symbolic language. Words could stand for objects not present, actions not yet taken, or ideas beyond immediate experience. Sentences could link concepts into narratives, instructions, or plans. With language, knowledge could be shared not only within a moment, but across generations. Fire-making techniques, hunting strategies, medicinal uses of plants, all could be remembered, taught, and refined. This flow of information became cumulative, building culture layer upon layer. Art provides some of the clearest evidence of symbolic thought. Cave paintings, carvings, beads, and figurines dating back tens of thousands of years reveal humans imagining beyond survival. They painted animals on walls not to eat them, but to represent them, to hold their presence in color and line. They shaped small figurines, perhaps of fertility or spirit, reflecting concepts larger than the physical object. These acts of creativity show that humans could see the world not only as it was, but as it might be, or as it could be remembered. Culture extended far beyond art. Tools became more sophisticated, shaped from stone, bone, and eventually metal. Clothing, shelters, and ornaments reflected not only function, but identity and belonging. Rituals and traditions emerged, giving structure to communities. Burial practices suggest awareness of mortality and perhaps belief in realms beyond life. In every gesture of culture, humans expressed connection, not just to the present moment, but to memory, to imagination, and to each other. The rise of culture was deeply tied to social bonds. Homo sapiens lived in groups, sharing tasks of hunting, gathering, and child-rearing. Within these groups, language allowed cooperation on new scales. Hunts could be planned with precision. Food could be distributed fairly. Conflicts could be resolved through negotiation rather than force. Stories, myths, and songs carried lessons, shaping identity and guiding behavior. Culture was not separate from survival. It was survival itself, creating resilience through unity. Migration spread Homo sapiens across the world. Around 60,000 years ago, groups began leaving Africa, moving into the Middle East, Asia, Europe, and eventually the Americas and Oceania. Everywhere they went, they adapted not just with tools and shelters, but with culture. They learned to hunt reindeer in frozen tundras, to fish in tropical seas, to farm river valleys, to navigate oceans. Language and culture allowed them to meet challenges without waiting for slow biological evolution. Knowledge could be shared, adjusted, and reinvented in a single lifetime. The cooperation of Homo sapiens extended to networks beyond immediate families. Trade routes carried shells, pigments, and obsidian between distant groups. Alliances formed, knowledge spread, and human communities became interconnected webs. In this expansion, the seeds of modern societies were planted. Culture became the medium through which humans shaped not only themselves, but the environments. They inhabited from a calm perspective. The emergence of Homo sapiens is a meditation on imagination. To speak of things unseen, to draw symbols, to create rituals, these acts reflect a mind capable of stepping beyond the present. Imagination allowed humans to plan, to hope, to fear, and to dream. It also created empathy, the ability to see from another's perspective. These qualities wove humanity into a species not only of survival, but of meaning. Even today, language and culture remain the foundations of human life. Every word spoken, every story told, every tradition observed is part of the same lineage. When people sing, write, or gather in rituals, they are continuing practices tens of thousands of years old. The languages of the world, diverse yet connected, are living echoes of the first symbolic speech. The art in galleries, the music in the air, the customs of families, all are threads in the vast fabric of culture woven by Homo sapiens. It is soothing to imagine early humans gathered around fire, telling stories under starry skies. Their words, shaped by breath, carried knowledge and comfort. Their drawings on cave walls captured visions that outlived them. Their rituals bound communities together, giving structure and continuity. In these quiet acts, the essence of humanity took shape. When you reflect on Homo sapiens and the rise of language and culture, think not of sudden brilliance, but of gradual layering. Words added to words, stories added to memories, traditions added to lives. Like the steady rhythm of waves, culture grew in small increments until it filled the world. The gift of language and culture is not only our past, but our present, connecting us in calm persistence to those who came before. When we think of evolution, it is easy to imagine it as something that happened long ago, a story of ancient seas, giant reptiles, and early humans shaping stone tools. Yet evolution is not finished. It is a continuous process, unfolding quietly. In every generation, modern humans, Homo sapiens, are not an endpoint, but a chapter still being written. Our bodies, our minds, and our cultures continue to change, shaped by environments, choices, and time. The physical form of modern humans emerged around 200,000 to 300,000 years ago. Our skeletons are lighter than those of earlier relatives, with high foreheads, rounded skulls, and smaller jaws. These traits may seem stable, but subtle changes are still occurring. Genes shift, sometimes offering resistance to diseases, sometimes adjusting to diets, sometimes altering how we respond to altitude, climate, or even light. Lactose tolerance in adults, for example, spread in some populations only within the last 10,000 years after the domestication of animals. Sickle cell traits, providing resistance to malaria, reflect adaptation to particular environments. These examples remind us that evolution is not a finished event, but a quiet adjustment continuing in the present. Cultural evolution is even more dynamic. Unlike genetic change, which takes generations, culture can shift within years or even days. The invention of agriculture, the rise of cities, the spread of languages, the sharing of stories all transformed human life more rapidly than biological traits ever could. Fire shaped diets, tools shaped hands, writing shaped memory. Today, technology and global communication shape how humans interact, altering behaviors and environments at a pace unmatched in earlier history. In this sense, culture is a continuation of evolution, carried not in DNA, but in knowledge and practice. Language remains at the center of human change. With it, people exchange ideas across continents, across generations, and even across digital spaces. Knowledge once limited to small groups can now spread instantly. This interconnectedness shapes societies, relationships, and opportunities for cooperation. It also creates challenges, new stresses, new conflicts, new dependencies. Yet, at its heart, it reflects the same principle as in earlier times: survival and growth through connection. Modern humans are also shaped by migration. From the earliest movements out of Africa, humans have carried genes and cultures into new regions, blending and diversifying. This mixing continues today as global travel and communication bring populations into closer contact. Genetic variation flows across boundaries, enriching the species. Cultural variation flows as well, creating new traditions, languages, and ways of living. The journey of humanity is not linear but braided, with many paths converging and diverging in gentle patterns. At the same time, humans now influence evolution itself. Through medicine, agriculture, and technology, we alter survival and reproduction in ways no other species has done. Vaccines, antibiotics, and surgeries reduce the impact of many diseases. Selective breeding has transformed plants and animals. For food, genetic research even hints at possibilities of direct editing. These interventions raise questions, but they also show that humanity is both a product of evolution and an active participant in guiding it. The environment we create also shapes us. Living in cities, breathing different air, eating processed foods, and spending time in artificial light, all these factors influence health and biology. Our ancestors adapted to forests, savannas, and rivers. We now adapt to apartments, offices, and networks. The pace of change is fast, but adaptation continues, whether in our genes, our behaviors, or our cultures. Even as we transform the earth, we remain part of it. The oxygen we breathe still comes from plants and algae. The water we drink still cycles through rivers and clouds. The soil that grows food still depends on microbes and fungi. In every heartbeat and every breath, we are connected to the same rhythms that supported the earliest cells. Evolution is not separate from us. It is within us, and it surrounds us. It is soothing to reflect on the continuity of this journey. The same forces that shaped trilobites, amphibians, and early mammals still shape humans today. Variation arises. Some traits persist, others fade. The rhythm of change is steady, like the tide. We may imagine ourselves as unique, but we are threads in the same fabric, woven gently over billions of years. Modern humans also carry forward the heritage of imagination. Culture, art, science, and philosophy are not separate from evolution, but expressions of it. They are ways our species adapts, explores, and prepares for futures not yet seen. From the first cave paintings to modern digital art, from firelit stories to global communication networks, humans have always used imagination as a tool for survival and meaning. The ongoing journey of Homo sapiens is not without challenges. Climate change, resource use, and the loss of biodiversity test our ability to adapt wisely. Yet these challenges also echo earlier trials: ice ages, extinctions, shifting landscapes. Humanity has survived by cooperation, resilience, and imagination. These qualities remain our calmest strengths. When you think of modern humans and then the ongoing evolutionary journey, imagine not a species at its final form, but one still becoming. Evolution has no fixed destination, no endpoint of perfection. It is an unfolding, measured in breaths and generations, in stories and songs, in small, changes carried forward. Our place in this story is neither beginning nor end, but part of the gentle continuum of life. Even tonight, as you listen, your body carries the work of billions of years' cells, powered by mitochondria that were once independent bacteria, DNA, written in an ancient code, lungs filled with oxygen first released by cyanobacteria, and a mind shaped by the patient layering of culture. You are evolution, still in motion, still in rhythm with the earth. From a calm perspective, the story of modern humans is one of belonging. We belong to the oceans where life began, to the forests that nurtured primates, to the fire circles of Homo erectus, and to the communities of Homo sapiens. We belong to each other, connected by language, memory, and care. And we belong to the ongoing journey of life, which continues not with haste, but with quiet persistence. You've been listening to the Sleepy Brain Dose. Together, we've traced the calm path of evolution, step by step, across oceans, forests, and skies. May this gentle story remind you that life itself moves with patience, never in haste, always in rhythm. As you close your eyes, let your breath steady, let your thoughts soften, and rest in the quiet knowledge that you are part of this unfolding journey. Good night, and may peace stay with you until morning.